कैसा गुजर गया वो ज़माना कैसा कैसा हंसी खुशी की बहार थी जिसने गुजर गया वो ज़माना कैसा कैसा गुजर गया तमन्नाओं के किसने कदम कदम पर हिलते थे अब वही रखता उजड़ा बन है क्या मैंने किया है क्या मैंने किया है क्यों मुझसे खफा है तू क्या मैंने किया है.
These were glimpses of New Theatre's hit movies. The elephant mascot may not mean anything to this or even the earlier generation, but once upon a time it meant so much to so many people everywhere. To them, the elephant insignia, designed by Jatin Sen, the head lifted and trunk raised, stood for a touch of class. Indeed, if MGM's roaring lion stood for quality, then the New Theatre's elephant banner invariably raised hopes of cinegoers way back in the 1930s. Who was the man behind the banner? Unassuming and self-effacing, Barindranath Sircar, better known as B.N. Sircar, born on the 5th of July 1901 in Bhagalpur, into a family of renowned lawyers, he was the eldest son of Sir N.N. Sircar, Advocate General of India and law member of the Viceroy's Executive Council, and Nabanalini Sircar, his mother. After qualifying in science, intermediate with a high first division, he was sent to England for training in engineering. Qualifying as a civil engineer in London, he returned home in 1926. His only exposure to performing arts while in England was his weekend visits to movie and theatre houses. Back in Calcutta, Sircar found that the job of a civil engineer, taking up only construction jobs, was quite exasperating. It was on one of those days when his friend Haren Ghosh, the famous impresario, convinced him that movie making held out better prospects than constructing houses. Aware of his father's aversion and also the then social stigma, Sircar went ahead and made 2 silent films, Chor Kanta and Chashar Mein, in 1931.
It's really surprising that a man who secured a degree in civil engineering, that too not from India but from England, and should start ultimately as a producer in film industry. It was really very, very surprising. I mean, he could have easily started a engineering firm in those days. That was back in 1920s. And today if you'd start building bridges and mansions and townships in those days, perhaps it would have been the largest industrial firm in India today, under his able stewardship and for his propensity.
Both the films lost money. But with unshaken faith, Sircar went ahead and established New Theatres, a full-fledged film production company, on the 10th of February 1931. He bought 4 acres of land in the suburb of Tollygunge, then a mere jungle, and there he built his studio complex. He invested in the latest equipment, recruited bright young technicians like Mukul Bose, Loken Bose and Bani Datta, and made his first talkie film, Dena Pauna, in 1931, based on a story by the famous novelist Sarath Chatterjee. The film flopped. A worried Sircar now started a spate of Urdu films that struggled to break even. Solace came next year when Rabindranath Tagore visited new theatres with students from Shantiniketan to film his dance drama Notir Puja. That was when Golghar of new theatres was especially erected to create a Shantiniketan atmosphere. This then became Sircar's room where he would meet visitors. Surviving a few more failures, Sircar's faith was reinforced when he offered the story of the legendary singer-poet Chandidas to a relative newcomer, Devaki Kumar Bose, in Bangla. This film was later to be made in Hindi. It was directed by Nitin Bose, who was the cameraman of the Bangla version of Chandidas, with the legendary K.L. Sehgal and Uma Shashi in the lead.
प्रेम के संग बिताएगा जीवन प्रेम के संग बिताएगा जीवन प्रेम ही प्राणाधार प्रेम के संग बिताए जीवन प्रेम के संग बिताएगा जीवन प्रेम ही प्राणाधार प्रेम सुधा से स्नान करूंगी प्रेम से होगा सिंगार प्रेम से होगा सिंगार
এই নিউ সিনেমাতে হলে যেখানে বসতেন অফিস ঘরে ধর্মতলা স্ট্রিট
I thoroughly enjoy my work at new theatres. One day I went to see Sircar Saab at his Dharamtula office to tell him that I have to stop working. It is disturbing my married life. We now have 2 children. I have to look after them, and my husband is getting annoyed. Sahib listened to me silently and then asked me, how much have I saved? I told him about 15,000 rupees. He simply asked, is that an amount? With folded hands, I said namaskar and left. I was getting a salary of 500 rupees those days. For 3 years at a stretch, he would give my salary to one of the employees and tell him, go, give it to Uma. It was after Chandidas that music in cinema was brought to the fore, along with treatment and technical efficiency. Chandidas ran for a record 64 weeks at Sircar's Chitra Cinema, which also happened to be Sircar's maiden venture in construction. Devaki Bose's next venture, Puran Bhagat, in 1933, was followed by Raj Rani Meera in the same year. Both the films created sensations throughout the country. And then came Vidyapati in 1938. As creative producer, Sircar's pioneering contribution lay in raising the cultural and aesthetic standards of Indian cinema as against the trivia churned out by Bombay's Hindi cinema. In particular, this implied that the films which came out of the studio were marked by socially relevant themes. In that, he questioned the status quo, while dealing with social realities of the time. To achieve this, some of the New Theatre's films were based on Bengali classics by Rabindranath Tagore, Sarath Chandra Chatterjee, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, and Qazi Nasrul Islam. For the first time in Indian cinema, the rating of directors at New Theatres was even higher than the stars. Indeed, Sircar had an unerring eye to detect talent. No wonder he collected around him such a constellation of directors who became stars of the time. If Dada Saheb Phalke was the king of Indian cinema, P.C. Barua was certainly its Prince of Wales. Prince of Gauripur, this footloose Assamese, was an all-rounder. A horseman, marksman, dancer, tennis player, billiard player, director, actor, and big game hunter, he shot over 25 films and 50 tigers. During his stay in Europe, he saw films by René Clair and Ernst Lubitsch, and returned home with a Jenkins Adair sound system. In Ruplekha, he introduced significant technical innovations like flashback and filmic expression of revealing drama through the Eisenstein technique of image construction. He rose to phenomenal heights with his epoch-making film Devdas in 1935, based on Sarath Chatterjee's best-selling novel, and this became a landmark in the talkie era, when through his technique he brought himself closer to life and literature. Basically a film of social protest against arranged marriages, it emphasized the evils of the poor and rich divide. The filmmaker portrayed Devdas reveling in suffering relentlessly, exploring the sense of doom there, and then by setting the tone for an unhappy ending. A whole generation wept over Devdas.
धर्मदास, अब मेरा जाने का वक्त आ गया। तो चलो, तुम घर चलो। नहीं, घर जाने का वक्त नहीं, बल्कि मेरा इस दुनिया से कूच कर जाने का वक्त आ गया है।
जब पिक्चर सुपर हिट हो गई और खबर आई कि दोपहर को एक गाना इसमें डालना है, तो मुझे बुलाया गया कि अभी लिखो। तो मैंने कहा सैगल साहब को लाइए, मैं लिखता हूँ, ये तर्ज बनाएंगे। तो उसी वक्त बैठ के ये बना था। ना मैं किसी का ना कोई मेरा,
ना मैं किसी का ना कोई मेरा, ना मैं किसी का ना कोई मेरा, छाया चारों और अंधेरा, छाया चारों और अंधेरा, अब कछु सूझत नहीं मोरे, अब दिन बीतत नहीं, सुख के सुख के सुख के।
Nitin Bose, the third New Theatre's stalwart, was the son of a rich businessman, and camera was his first and last love. No wonder he came to be known as a wizard of the camera. He photographed almost all New Theatre's movies right from the silent era onwards. He made his directorial debut with the Hindi remake of Chandidas. For the first time, multiple cameras were used in India. His next venture was Pandit Sudarshan's story Bhagya Chakra and Dhoop Chhaw in Hindi. He wanted to have quick, interchanging shots for dramatic effect. Song sequences proved to be a technical problem, since songs were recorded on location. The problem was how to cut the songs to synchronize with the rapidly changing shots. His brother, a sound recordist, Mukul, suggested that the song first be recorded and then picturized. He'd actually got the idea earlier when he'd seen Pankaj Malik giving lips for a gramophone record song. The brother set to work and succeeded in the very first attempt. And so, playback was born. And from Indian cinema, it was only 3 months later that the West adopted this technique, which revolutionized the art of synchronization of film music the world over.
मिटती आस है जो तकियन की मिटती आस है जो तकियन की समझो गई तो गई करूं क्या आस निराश गई.
When Mr. Sircar made this studio, he collected all the cultured people of Bengal during time. Mr. Sircar, as he made many good, very good films, when we entered this industry, it was a untouchable. He made this industry a sacred place. I remember the great actor Prithviraj Kapoor, when he used to come in our studio, he stopped his car before the gate and he used to take the dust of the gate in his hair, in his head. I told, why you do it? Well, it is my tirtha.
When I first met him, he had come to Bombay and I was asked by my editor to go and interview him. So when I met him, I felt I was meeting an Englishman. See, he was impeccably dressed and he spoke beautiful English, and he was a gentleman personified. He didn't have any of those uncouth airs that we generally come across in our line. And B.N. Sircar was, when I finished my interview with him, we had tea together, and he personified for me a man like Jack Warner, the Warner Brothers of Hollywood, or the MGM studios. He was the head of a studio. He was a father of creative people. He was a father of many creative people.
And New Theatres was also not only a filmmaking studio, but also was a training ground for young filmmakers. No, at that time there were no film training institutions. But New Theatres was for us the first studio which, and perhaps because of the far-sighted vision of B.N. Sircar, he saw to it the need for training young filmmakers. So a lot of talents which emerged later, perhaps Bimal Roy, he was an assistant cameraman and finally a cameraman, and later he was given a chance to direct a film independently under New Theatres. Karthik Chatterjee, who made Chota Bai, and so they all started as assistants, second assistant, third assistants, or as a dialogue writer, Kedar Sharma. So that way, you can see a lot of important filmmakers who emerged in the 50s. I already mentioned Bimal Roy, then even Hrishikesh Mukherjee. He was an editing assistant in New Theatre Studio.
He had a half a dozen of best directors in India available in those days with their assistants. Half a dozen of cameramen, the best cameramen in India, sound engineers, the brilliant students of Calcutta University, their assistants, editing department, the music department, which was led by the great music director R.C. Boral and Pankaj Mullik. They had their own assistants, they had their own orchestra, and Mr. Sircar recruited the best possible musicians and instrumentalists from different parts of India.
B.N. Sircar was the first producer who understood the supremacy of music in Indian cinema and collected around him a galaxy of rememberable music makers and singers like R.C. Bural, Pankaj Malik, Timir Baran, Kanan Devi, K.C. Day, and K.L. Sehgal. If New Theatre's music was on the lips of everyone because there was perfect blending of poetry, lyrics and melody, Pankaj Malik proved to be a king, for it was he who first brought Tagore's music to cinema. He also appeared in films as an actor.
ये कौन आज आया सवेरे सवेरे के दिल क्यों कोई उठा सवेरे सवेरे कहा रूप ने चाँद है चौधरी का कहा रूप ने चाँद है चौधरी का मगर चाँद कैसा सवेरे सवेरे
The other music maker was R.C. Bural, who grew up in a family of singers. His father, Lal Chand Bural, was a renowned musician. R.C. Bural composed music for some of New Theatre's classics like Chondidas, Vidyapati, Street Singer, Sapera, Lagan, amongst others. A special feature of Bural's music was his classical bass.
चार कहार मिले मोरी डोलियां सजावे मोरा अपना बेगाना छूट जाए मोरा नहीं हरे
I asked him how K.L. Sehgal was introduced to you. He told me there was one distributor of films in UP called Kaji ji. It is on record in a letter which he wrote to me. Kaji ji invited Sehgal to sing in one betrothal ceremony and invited me also. Me means Ven Sircar. He said, as I did not know much of the music, I told, Rai with me also, Rachan Boran. Nitin Babu was with me, he told me. And after I heard K.L. Sehgal, I signed him for 150 rupees next day. B.N. Sircar told me that I was very fearful, that I had already singers in my New Theatre studio like K.C. Day, Pankaj Malik, how they would react if Sehgal was employed in New Theatre. But they did not mind. On the contrary, they worked for K.L. Sehgal.
A legend in his own lifetime, B.N. Sircar was the last of the gentleman producers of his time. Immaculately dressed, mild-mannered and soft-spoken, he had kind words for everyone. He had a strong sense of humor and never lost his patience or temper.
মজার কথা এই তো স্টুডিও এখানে বসে এই আশেপাশে একটা খুব ভালো আম গাছ ছিল
Once in a playful moment, catching me and my friend Sunanda on top of a mango tree, Mr. Sircar had us fully forewarned that if we broke a leg, that would be the end of our acting careers. But if we so desired, he'd send the mangoes right to our home.
अलबेला मस्ताना नीले आकाश में दूर दूर तक उड़ता पंख पसार उड़ता पंख पसार नीले आकाश में दूर दूर तक उड़ता पंख पसार pasar albela mastana.
When his studio caught fire, destroying negatives and prints of some of his classics like Devdas and many more, he took the catastrophe in his stride.
আমার সঙ্গে যারা কাজ করেছিলেন তারা সবাই নতুন লোক এবং প্রথম এইটি করে আমাদের সুবিধা ছিল।
I don't remember the details of how it all began. What was actually in our favor was that we had no experience and no ideal to follow. So we ourselves had to carve out our own path and set the ideals. I was lucky to have such masters as Barua, Deviki Bose, Nitin Bose and many others. And I was lucky to have their cooperation all along. We had a reputation for making good films and made about 150 films.
The ultimate tribute to new theatres was by Chandravati Devi, the legendary actress who said, "When we entered new theatres, we were non-entities. But when we left, we had an identity." Even after new theatres closed down, Sircar remained active in improving the standards of Indian cinema.
I met him on few occasions whenever he and we were in the committee meetings, committees built by the central government. And I have always found him there, maintaining a poise and grace. And even though he was soft-spoken, and he rarely spoke, only when occasion arose, I could see him to be an intense man, a man with tremendous intensity, but he never used to get worked up. And immediately I felt what he said about him, that he was a legend in his own time, how true it was.
My meeting with him, I found a man of towering personality and integrity, and with a great sense of discipline and decorum, with great organizational ability, and moreover, his large-heartedness.
We sometimes really feel sad that we don't have a setup like New Theatre Studio run by B.N. Sircar. He was really a father figure. I think Bengali cinema is so greatly indebted to him and to New Theatre Studio. Why only Bengali cinema? I think the Indian cinema as a whole. You know what happened during those days, B.N. Sircar really played the role of a producer who creative and at the same time who wants to participate in the making of the film.
Alamara was the first talkie film released through our distribution in 1931, and we had the pleasure of releasing that picture in Chitra Cinema belonging to Sri B.N. Sircar. We felt that this was a great honor to our distributing company, as New Theatres was a brand of which everyone was proud of.
In recognition of his far-reaching contribution towards advancement of Indian cinema, B.N. Sircar was awarded the Dada Saheb Phalke Award. In a rare example of recognizing the full impact that new theatres met in ushering in the golden age of cinema, Nitin Bose, R.C. Boral, Pankaj Malik, Kanan Devi and Prithvi Raj Kapoor were bestowed the prestigious Dada Saheb Phalke Award. Indeed, B.N. Sircar was truly a renaissance man of Indian cinema.
It is now 20 years since my father, Mr. B.N. Sircar, has passed away. We know that it is not possible for anyone to recreate the new theatres that was. And therefore, on the occasion of his birth centenary, the best we can seek is his blessings to enable me and the members of my family to carry on the spirit with which the institution was once founded. Jivotang Jyotiretu Chayang is the motto that must be kept alive.
फुलवारे हमारी महक रही फुलवारे घूम रहे हैं डारे 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 महक रही फुलवारे हमारी महक रही फुलवारे कैसी कैसी चली कैसी कैसी चली हवाएं फूल फल बिखराए कैसी कैसी चली हवाएं फूल फल बिखराए मन आशा